Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. I am sure that some of you, especially the female part of humanity, will think that I am just naive, guileless, ignorant, forgetful, or just a fool. Maybe it is, but I don't think so. All my life I've believed in saying what you mean and meaning what you say. I try very hard not to deal with people who behave inappropriately when it comes to this. And transferred to another major in college, quit 2 jobs and dumped 3 girlfriends because it was difficult or even impossible for the people involved to say what they meant and or have in mind kind of what they said. I thought I had found the perfect match in the brand. She was smart, personable, kind, funny, and possessed a beauty that was always admired by men. However, one thing I couldn't figure out was her choice of girlfriends, especially her best friend Katie. I think guys are looking for friends that are not what women are looking for, or at least Brenda was looking for. Her best friend was a buxom brunette, while Brenda was a petite blonde. There are a lot of rough edges in Katie's character, while Brenda does not have them. However, instead of finding Katie's rudeness embarrassing, Brenda found it funny. Besides, Katie is probably the most stubborn, she would call it self-confident woman I've ever met, and apparently she had a phobia of commitment, which is why she was constantly changing boyfriends. However, in my opinion, Katie's biggest problem was that she was a know-it-all. This is especially upsetting to me, because I was once a know-it-all too, with the only difference that my brain remembers the actual information instantly and forever. I stopped being a know-it-all just because I never behaved this way with other people, but kept it a secret. Katie is even more confident in her knowledge than I have ever been. Only she doesn't have the kind of mind that holds information like I do. However, there is one reason why I have never objected to having Katie around. If you were to select 1,000 random women between the ages of 18 and 40, 30-year-old Katie would be either the first or second most beautiful in the group. No exceptions. Looking back, I think that by listening to the comments of my male friends long after this happened, I sowed the seeds of my own demise in 2 different ways. I was honest with Brenda when she asked me questions about other women, and I always took a position opposite to Katie's statements about her. Although in more than half of the cases, I either didn't know if she was right or not, or I knew she was right. But I still wanted to be the opposite, hoping that she would change her omniscience. Perhaps the most egregious example of my naivety in answering Brenda's questions about other women was this exchange. When I told my male friends about it a long time later, they either cringed or burst out laughing. "Blake, if I wasn't around, which of my friends would you like to make love to?" Actually, Brenda, not with any of them, although I might like to make love to some of them. The only person in the world I want to make love to is you. You're such an asshole, Brenda giggled. No, it's absolutely true, I replied seriously. Brenda thought for a moment and then continued. Knowing you, Blake, I'm probably right. However, which of my friends would you like to make love to? Up to this point, everything was not so bad for me. I could have gotten out of it, but then either stupidity or naivety appeared, depending on your point of view. In fact, the only one with whom I would certainly make love was if you disappeared from the world for a while. In my life, and only then. Katie for her stunning body and appearance. I paused, not understanding Brenda's expression. Maybe Cheryl, maybe Denise too, although most likely not. But Katie is for sure. Brenda's expression became even more incomprehensible, and then she changed the subject, and I didn't think about it anymore until a long time after the first fateful night. The first fateful event, we had a little party at home. Of course, Katie and her current regular boyfriend Phil were present. Cheryl and Denise are with their husbands, as well as 2 of my work friends and their wives. The booze was flowing freely and everyone was having a good time. Since I don't usually drink, but I don't need a drink to have a good time either, I had a lot of fun. I observed our guests' lack of restraint and also enjoyed the conversations. Katie then made one of her omniscient statements. It was uttered with drunken profanities, which I will not try to fix. I'm selling some shares from my pension fund and temporarily placing money on the money market because the Fed is going to raise the interest rate at its next meeting, Katie announced. It was something I knew from the inside-out knowledge that I wasn't going to trade on to make money in the stock market because it would be illegal, but knowledge that I didn't hesitate to use against Katie. I'm sorry, Katie, but you're wrong. The Fed will keep the interest rate at the same level at its next meeting, which I think will take place in 10 days. Oh, Blake, you're talking complete nonsense. You're always wrong, and I'm getting tired of it. Do you want to bet? This phrase was uttered when there was a lull in the music, and most of the guests laughed when they heard it. Oh, dear Katie, I have secret information and you're going to lose. I don't want to steal from you, I replied in an unusually condescending tone. Well, I have classified information too, and I know they're going to increase it, and I have $100 that says I'm right, Katie boasted. It's not even worth taking the time to shake hands, I replied, determined to make a bet so improbable that she couldn't cover it. I have $10,000 that says I'm right. After a moment of stunned silence, Katie retorted less sharply than in her other remarks. I can't afford it. You're only saying that to give up the bet. In fact, I knew that Katie was bad with money and probably didn't have much money besides her apartment and pension fund, and certainly not $10,000. I'm sorry. Either bet $10,000 or withdraw your erroneous statement, I giggled. Katie started muttering something and the other guests laughed. The music started playing again and I thought that would be the end of it. However, I soon saw Brenda and Katie talking quietly in the passage between the kitchen and the garage. This piqued my interest, and I stood on tiptoe to see if I could eavesdrop. Since they were both drunk, they talked much louder than they thought. Although part of the conversation was insignificant and did not require retelling, there was one stunning part of it. Again, I'm not trying to convey their drunken voices. Help me, Brenda. What can I bet Blake instead of $10,000? I have to shut him up. How sure are you that you're going to win, Katie? 100%. I do have classified information. I could use that $10,000 and I'd split it with you. Hey, it's my money too. However, I would really like to spend a long weekend at a luxury spa, which Blake did not want to agree to. If we could change the bid by $5,000 and arrange for the two of us to take a 3-day trip to that luxury spa I just read about online, I have something that might get Blake to agree. I'm in the game. What's it? I once asked Blake if he would use any of my friends if I wasn't around, and he mentioned you. This was followed by devilish laughter from both of them. Yes, but you're here, Katie chuckled, and I don't think you'd want me to make love to your husband. You just said you weren't going to lose. Are you giving up on this? Hell no. But if there's a 1 in a million chance, I don't want you to be mad at me for using your husband because I'm going to pay. There was silence. He would never have forced you to do it anyway, Brenda replied hesitantly. And otherwise he wouldn't have agreed to pay for 3 days at the spa. Let's propose it. Although I couldn't see her, I imagined Katie shrugging her shoulders and having a big smile on her face. Of course, I heard her say, "Okay, let's find a sucker." I ducked into the kitchen pantry and I'm sure they didn't notice me eavesdropping. As soon as they passed me, I found a few guests to chat with before they noticed me. Less than 5 minutes after they had worked out their plan, Katie and Brenda appeared in front of me. Hey, you ignorant asshole. We have a counteroffer for your bet, Katie said with a big smile. Why are you two here together? I asked, pretending to be puzzled. You'll see, Katie giggled as she and Brenda took me by the arms and led me into an empty lobby. That's what it's about, stupid. You bet $5,000 and treat your wife and me to a 3-day vacation at a luxury spa when I win. You have a 1 in a million chance that you will win this, and you can use me, smiled Katie. Are you involved in this? I asked Brenda, pretending to be incredulous. Of course. I really need to spend 3 days at the spa, she chuckled. Hey, if you're going to act like a coward, then don't take the bet, and we'll tell everyone here that you're really a wimp, but don't blame it on me. If you win, I don't mind you using it, Brenda replied, crossing her arms over her chest. How much will 3 days at the spa cost me for both of you? About $6,000, Brenda said, then giggled. How do I know, Katie, that when I win, you will really take part, and not just lie like a log? I'll put it in writing, asshole. With 1 chance in a million that you win, I'll do my best, she giggled, then stroked my obvious boner through my pants again until I took her hand away. I paused for a good 2 minutes looking from one to the other while they repeated, Well, coward, about every 30 seconds. Finally, I turned to Brenda, took her hands and looked into her eyes. When I win, I'll take my winnings, don't think otherwise. She giggled, nodded, and said, I'm fine. I did the same thing with Katie, and her reaction was exactly the same as Brenda's. Okay, that's settled. We'll sign it tomorrow, I said, shaking hands with each of them. Katie pressed her lips to me while I shook her hand, which made Brenda laugh, although she didn't really seem amused. Katie and her boyfriend Phil were too drunk to drive home and stayed the night. I put most of the other guests in a taxi. I used Brenda that night, even though she was almost passed out and couldn't contribute. Although judging by the sounds she was making, she really liked it. I'll never understand how they could agree to this bet. The second fateful event. The next morning, because I didn't drink alcohol and had made love very well the night before, I had clear eyes and a bushy tail. The others weren't like that. Phil was in the shower trying to be human again, and Katie and Brenda looked terrible and moaned while they chatted and drank coffee at the kitchen table. "Hi, girls," I greeted them happily. "Don't be so funny or I'll kill you," Katie moaned. "Me too," Brenda said. "Well, I hope that now that you've sobered up, you'll come to your senses and give up the bet we made last night," I grinned. They both raised their eyebrows in surprise. "We're not going to do anything like that," Katie growled. Brenda nodded in agreement. "Tell me, oh fortune teller Katie, does Phil know about your bet?" "Sort of," she replied. "What the hell does sort of mean? If we're going to make this bet, he should be aware of it too. I don't want him chasing me with a shotgun after I win and use you." Katie didn't seem to like my position, but after pausing for a few seconds, she said, "Okay, when Phil gets out of the shower, we'll fill him in." I made myself an omelet and asked two suffering beauties if they wanted it, to which they just groaned, "No." When Phil came out of the shower, he looked better than the two women, and despite his hangover, he accepted my offer to make him an English muffin. While I was eating my omelet and Phil was eating his English muffin, I asked him casually, "So, Phil, do you know about the bet that Brenda and Katie made with me last night?" "Yes, but Katie doesn't have $1,000, let alone $10,000, so it's never going to happen," he replied casually. "So you haven't heard about the counteroffer?" "No, I do not think so. Instead of investing $10,000, I will invest $5,000 in cash and send Katie and Brenda to a luxury spa for 3 days worth about $6,000 if Katie wins. But if I most likely win, I can enthusiastically make love to your girlfriend." Phil raised an eyebrow, looked at Katie, then at Brenda, who had pale smiles on their faces, and then a wide smile appeared on his face. "Then I can use Brenda?" "No, damn it," I replied energetically. "You have nothing to do with this bet. This is between me and Katie, and Brenda either really, really wants to spend 3 days at the spa, or she doesn't mind me making love to her best friend because she suggested it, knowing that Katie doesn't have money. You won't get anything, no matter how the bet turns out, unless Katie gives you some of her $5,000, even if the probability of her winning is low." Phil finished his muffin and stared at Katie. "All right, Kat, are you going to share $5,000 with me to get my approval?" "I don't really need your approval, Phil. We're not married," Katie replied, though without bluntness. "Yes, but you want me to be happy, don't you?" he asked with a smile. Katie thought for a moment. "Of course. I'll give you $1,000 so you can buy a new racing bike that you're interested in when I win." "It costs $1,200, he retorted. "Okay, if I win, I'll give you $1,200, but not a penny more." "I agree," Phil told me with a shrug. When I was making the terms of the bet, I again advised Brenda and Katie not to go through with it, but it seemed to only strengthen their resolve. I included everything we talked about in the agreement, including a clause that said that if I won, it would not harm any relationship between the four of us, and that there would be no revenge or quid pro quo on either side. I also provided that anyone can reverse the decision 24 hours before the expected announcement of the Fed's decision, which will probably happen around 5 p.m. in 9 days, but no later. Katie, Brenda, Phil, and I all signed the document together and put a date on it. I made copies for each of the other three and kept the original. Katie and Brenda regained full consciousness after taking a shower themselves, and the four of us went to the county fair and then had dinner outside the house. We didn't discuss the bet anymore that day. Over the next 7 days, I conducted additional research on this topic and had a long conversation with my inner source. I was almost 100% sure that I was right, not only based on what my source told me, but also from studying the facts and figures related to the situation and the publicly available minutes of the last Fed meeting. However, just in case, I put a voice recorder on our home phone, on which Brenda and Katie talked almost every day. While I was quickly going through the topics that Brenda and Katie were discussing and that were not related to the bet, so as not to intrude too much into their personal lives, I listened carefully to every discussion related to the bet. Katie's source, as I expected, was a braggart who knew nothing about the situation, but was probably just bragging to Katie, trying to get into her pants, which she said would never happen. The day before the third fateful event, Brenda told Katie that she had booked days at the spa for them and made a non-refundable deposit of $500. For some reason, this made me very angry. All the fears I had about making a bet left me, although I decided to make another difficult attempt to cancel the bet, and then another soft one. I couldn't understand either woman. The third fateful event. The day before it was too late to cancel the bet, Phil was out of town, but we invited Katie to dinner. After a very tasty dinner and some pleasant conversations, I started talking about betting again. Listen, girls, I don't have false bravado, but I'm going to win the bet. Now I will give you a chance to cancel it, and I will not. I repeat, I will not tell any of our friends that you have refused to participate. I also won't poke it in your face. At least not much, I told them, only uttering the last phrase with a smile. It seems to me, Brenda, that your know-it-all husband is chickened out. Yes, Blake, that's what it really sounds like, Brenda chimed in. No, it's not like that. I'm just afraid that if I win, despite what is stated in the written agreement, it will negatively affect our relationship with all three. Actually, Blake, it's pretty insulting, Brenda replied, a little irritated. I can keep my word, although I definitely wouldn't like it if you made love to Katie. At that moment, I rudely interrupted her. I'm not just going to make love to her, I'm going to use her half to death. Okay, I'll admit you're right, Brenda continued, even more angry, even though Katie blushed and crossed her legs. Although I certainly wouldn't like it if you used Katie, since I voluntarily participated in the agreement, it wouldn't bother me for more than a day, and it certainly won't affect my wonderful marriage or my affection for my best friend in any way. I looked at Katie. She began to recover from her blush. I meant what I said in the written agreement. Brenda means too much to me for this to affect my relationship with her, and I wouldn't have agreed to this if I hadn't believed Brenda when she said it wouldn't affect her marriage, Katie said, in a tone that seemed to indicate that she's trying to convince herself of this. In any case, this is a moot point. We are not losing. I shrugged my shoulders and we moved on to other topics. I didn't bring it up again. At 4:30 p.m., the day before the expected Fed announcement, just over 24 hours before that, I called Brenda at work. Hi, baby, I said happily. Hello, darling, was her cheerful reply. This is the last chance to cancel the bet, I said in a cheerful voice. No way in the world. I can't wait for the spa, was her mocking reply. Good. I have to work until about 6 in the evening. Should I buy something Chinese on the way home? I replied. That would be great. I'll have chicken with orange sauce and one pancake with filling and gluten-free, she replied. Understood. See you at 6:15 p.m. I really didn't understand these women. The fourth fateful event, I left work around 3:30 p.m. on the day of the expected Fed announcement. I hadn't tried to make love to Brenda the night before, and she hadn't demanded it, so I knew I had a supply of liquid for Katie. I shaved, took a shower, cut my pubic hair, and even took a nap for 10 minutes. Katie's apartment was only a 5-minute drive from my house, and she usually got home by 5, so I planned to go there right after the announcement. I was so confident in myself that I wrote a note to Brenda just before the Bloomberg News channel moved on to the announcement. Hi, Brenda. I'm at Katie's apartment, using her for a bet. I have to be home no later than 21 o'clock. I love you, Blake, my note said. The announcement at 4:50 p.m. was exactly what I expected. The Fed did not change the interest rate. I took a bottle of Katie's favorite wine, got in the car, and drove to her apartment, probably more excited than I've ever been, except for the honeymoon. When I got there at 4:59 p.m., Katie's car was parked there, so she probably left work early herself to listen to the same news as me. Katie's first words when she opened the door were, "God, you did it so fast. Are you here to gloat?" "No," I replied, trying to look puzzled. "I came for my winnings." "What?" she asked sincerely. "What can surprise you at all?" I asked, walking past her into the apartment, put a bottle of wine on the table in the hallway, and then took out the betting document and waved it in front of her. Well then, Brenda said you wouldn't do it. Katie paused before I could take her in my arms and kiss her fervently. When I pulled away, I said, "That's not what it says on the betting table, and that's not what she said every time I gave her the opportunity to refuse, including yesterday." "I'm taking the winnings," I continued, starting to massage her huge mammary glands. Listen, Blake," she stammered, but didn't push my hands away. We couldn't do this another time. I just got home from work. I need to take a shower and I need to talk to Brenda. That was all she had time to say before I kissed her again. We can take a shower together, I replied happily, picking her up in my arms and heading to the bathroom in her master bedroom. Katie made protesting noises as we climbed the stairs to her, but when I put her down in the bathroom and took off my shorts, exposing the most powerful boner I've ever had, she muttered incoherently, staring at him. I quickly undressed Katie, probably in a fit of zeal, tearing the zipper and a couple of buttons. When we were both naked, I kissed her again while the shower water was heating up. As soon as we got into the shower, I used it with my finger. The shower stall was too small to be comfortable making love in, and I wanted to get the most out of this one-time session, so as soon as I made sure it was clean, we got out of the shower and casually dried off. I was surprised that Katie looked even better naked than I expected. Her hips weren't perfect because they looked and felt better than I thought, so maybe they could be called beyond perfection, if that's an acceptable superlative. As soon as I started using Katie with my fingers in the shower, any pretense that she objected to what I was doing disappeared. I had no doubt that she would keep her promise and do everything possible to please me. I laid her on the bed on her back, spread her legs apart, and began kissing those otherworldly thighs, simultaneously pressing on her G-spot with 2 fingers. After her first moment, and it was a monstrous moment, I had to take care of my needs. Despite the fact that Katie is a big woman, her slit was surprisingly small. It took me 3 or 4 thrusts. I felt like I was in heaven. When we lay face to face, sweat glistened on our foreheads and chests. Despite the speed of our copulation, we laughed and exchanged words of mutual satisfaction. Then Katie did something that no other woman has ever done for me. Soon, Katie made me clean and hard again. With a mischievous smile, she reached over to the bedside table and took out a jar. Put it on. Katie seemed to be experiencing a continuous moment. She let out continuous screams as the entire area of her crotch contracted. When I was really happily using Katie, I heard the door open, there was a loud sigh, and then it slammed shut. Glancing at the mirror hanging on the dresser, I realized that Brenda had clearly got what she deserved. She obviously received my note and wanted to make sure for herself. Strangely enough, this only spurred me to use it even more intensively. However, the most erotic was the sound of Katie's massive boobs slapping as I pounded her with all the energy I could muster. For several years, I haven't had 3 ejaculations in one session. It wasn't a problem with Katie. As soon as we both came to our senses after love, our bodies completely glistened with sweat. We lay face to face again and expressed mutual satisfaction with our actions. After a while, another wide smile appeared on her face. How about making love? I've never had that before, I answered honestly. Wow, you're in for a treat, she giggled, licking her lips. I did as I was told again. I didn't need any more instructions. It was divine. It took a lot of effort, an otherworldly pleasant effort on our part for a delightfully long period of time, but it was worth every drop of energy and every moment spent. She really had a little moment, and I had an unprecedented one. After we separated, she licked off some of my liquid and then, laughing, hugged me tightly to her, so that we were both covered with my man cream. After the last delightfully long exchange of mutual pleasures, we went back to the shower. When we came out, I was shocked at how much time had passed. It was almost 20:30. The 3+ hours that have passed seemed like half an hour to me, but I think when the chimes strike properly, time flies by unnoticed. Do you want to have dinner? What is it? She asked. No, I'd better go home. I left Brenda a note saying that I would be back by 21 o'clock. She didn't seem to like what she saw when she came here, so I probably need to brush my hair a little. What do you mean? When she came here, what did she see? Katie stammered and covered her mouth with her hand. Yes, when I used you, she opened the bedroom door, gave a little scream or gasp, and then closed it, I replied. Didn't you hear that? Blake, dear, at that moment my chains burned out and I would not have heard the explosion of the grenade. Are you sure it was her? Who else could it be? Besides, I caught a glimpse of her in the mirror on your dressing table, and I had no doubts left. This intervention, did it bother you? What is it? She asked. Damn it, no. Nothing could stop me from using you. It was nirvana. Katie giggled, and we exchanged a depraved goodbye kiss. When I got home, Brenda was watching TV with a glass of wine in her hand and was clearly high. Well, unless it's a wayward husband, was what her distorted, almost drunken voice seemed to be saying. Did you have a good time using that cheating Katie? Brand. You said there was no chance you wouldn't like it. I told you that I would win and gave you every opportunity to cancel the bet, but you persisted. I didn't think you were using her. That's what she seemed to say next. You can't possibly have any reason to think that. I've told you several times that I'm going to do this, but you've never made it clear that you expect me to do the opposite. I would have canceled the bet myself if you had given that instruction. With that, Brenda finished the last sip of wine, glared at me, and tried to get up. She wasn't that drunk. She was in an alcoholic coma and began to slowly sink to the floor. I caught her head before she hit, but she should have had a bruise on her elbow. After that, things didn't go so smoothly. For the next 3 days, Brenda was passive-aggressive, then suddenly cheered up, and then even more quickly became gloomy. We didn't talk about the consequences of the bet. However, I listened to the recording of her only phone conversation with Katie after receiving the winnings. Brenda got angry and then started crying, wondering why Katie agreed to the bet. Brenda was not receptive to either Katie's logical statements or the illogical ones, and eventually hung up the phone. I sent Katie the most beautiful bouquet of roses I could find. They were lavender in color, which I had never seen before. I also bought a dozen for Brenda. Brenda threw her dozen in the trash, but Katie sent me an email thanking me for them and apologizing for misunderstanding Brenda. I will never understand women, and certainly not Brenda. The fifth fateful event. The relationship between the Blake family and Brenda remained cold for more than 2 weeks. During this time, we really had love twice. It was clear that Brenda just wanted to restore her love and shed her horns. Unfortunately, when I was using Brenda, I was mentally using Katie, but it led to very pleasant moments for both of us. Then the fifth fateful event happened. On Wednesday, Brenda came home from work a little late, but obviously in a good mood. She cooked dinner, accepted my help, smiled, giggled, and joked. I hoped this meant that she had bypassed my infidelity, but this is not the case. After we washed the dishes after dinner, Brenda grabbed my hand and smiling said, "We need to talk. Let's go into the living room." As soon as we sat down, Brenda got straight to the point. "You may have noticed that I've been depressed and unhappy lately." "No kidding? I would never have thought of that," I replied sarcastically. "Just listen," Brenda laughed, playfully hitting me on the knee. "So, I was going to see a psychologist, and she has the perfect solution to our problem." "Brenda, I don't have a problem. I just did what I promised. You're the only one who hasn't fulfilled what was agreed upon in our betting agreement. So if any of us have a problem, it's you." "I don't think so. In any case, the consultant's decision to return us to the state of love we were in before the bet was made is perfect. She says I need a 3-hour romance just like you had, and then we're even and we can continue. Isn't that great?" It took all my willpower not to scream. I pulled myself together and then asked, "Who is this wonderful consultant who advised you to go against our agreement, which provided for no revenge and quid pro quo?" She said that the agreement was unfair. "Anyway, her name is Stephanie Bromwell. She's a professional psychologist, MMA TGG, Brenda replied happily, handing me Stephanie's business card. I immediately got up, went to my home office, and opened my laptop. "What are you doing?" Brenda asked from the doorway. "Checking on your guru," I replied. It only took me a minute to find information about Bromwell on the internet. After just 3 minutes, I had a clear idea of who she was. "Brenda, this woman is not a certified family counselor or psychologist. In fact, she didn't have any degrees at all. She's a holistic counselor, whatever the hell that means. Those letters after her name are complete nonsense. Besides, she's been sued at least twice for misrepresentation," I grumbled, turning the laptop toward Brenda in case she wanted to take a look at it. She didn't want to look at it. "You're just upset because her decision is so logical. I'll do what she says. If you do that, our marriage is over. I believed that you agreed to no revenge and quid pro quo, and I insist on it. You don't want a divorce. Do you love me? This is the only way for me to solve our problem, and you will accept it." "Wow, that bet doesn't seem to have taught you anything, does it?" I growled, storming out the door. I never drink, but that night I did. The bartender showed compassion as well as responsibility and sent me home in a taxi around 2 in the morning. I slept on the couch I collapsed on in the living room and didn't go to work the next day. Instead, I went shopping and bought 2 small, high-resolution, battery-powered video cameras and installed them at both ends of the handbag that Brenda uses almost exclusively when she goes outside. That Thursday evening, when she returned home from work, we had a very unpleasant conversation. Regardless of what she said, my response was to withdraw from the betting agreement in her presence and say, "I have stated my position, and it does not change." On Friday, Katie called me from work. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Katie asked, "Are you aware of Phil and Brenda's plans for tonight?" I fell silent, feeling my blood pressure rise. She told me that despite the betting agreement, she was going to have a 3-hour affair. She didn't tell me it was going to be tonight or with Phil. Why with him? He had no more honesty about the betting agreement than Brenda. He was very angry that I went through with it. It didn't help that when we had a fight about it, I let it slip that loving you was the best thing in my life, Katie replied. This last statement knocked me out of my rut, but I quickly came to my senses and refrained from answering. For me, it was also the best thing in my life, although it was so. If she goes through with it, I told her that our relationship is over. I told Phil the same thing, but I don't think he believes it. In fact, Brenda called me at work from her office 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and each time she assured me that we would be best friends again as soon as she and Phil had their little fling. I'll try again, and if it doesn't work, she'll know that I take this as seriously as I take the bet, I replied. Katie giggled, which seemed inappropriate to me, but then added, "If that happens, keep me in mind," and then hung up. On Friday, when I returned home from work, Brenda was clearly preparing for an evening walk. Fortunately, she had her favorite camera bag with her, so I didn't have to change anything at the last minute. "So you're going for it, even though it's going to ruin our marriage," I growled. Brenda didn't even bother to look away from the mirror while applying makeup. "You love me and you'll understand that I have to do this to get us back to what we were. It may take a while, but you'll understand." "You really are a dumb fool, aren't you?" I growled. I've never talked to her like that before. When she turned to me, she looked scared. I went to my home office and locked the door. I checked the camera images on my laptop. I saw that Brenda continued to gather as if nothing had happened. I was hoping that wherever they went, there was Wi-Fi, and I could instantly find out what was going on. Brenda knocked on my door before she left. "Aren't you going to say goodbye, Blake?" she asked twice through the door. I didn't answer. Her last comment was, "Remember that I love you." Yes, that's right, I said to myself, realizing even more that I really don't understand women, or at least Brenda. Obviously, Brenda went to Phil's house because the cameras were installed quickly and one of them was installed in an acceptable location. Undressing didn't take long. I didn't have a sound, but I didn't need one. Fortunately, her purse was where I could clearly see the beautiful gymnastics they were going to do. I packed everything I needed, which almost completely filled my car, went to the warehouse that we rented more than a year ago, and put things there that I would not need right away. Then I replaced the combination lock with a new one, the combination of which Brenda did not know. I returned to the house, took my 2 suitcases with what I needed in the near future, printed out 2 pictures from video cameras that left no room for imagination, and put the pictures and my wedding ring on the kitchen table. I put the Hallelujah course on continuous playback in our stereo system and left, ending up in a long-stay motel. I do not know if Brenda called me because my mobile was turned off. On Monday, I went to the divorce lawyer. I made an appointment for Thursday with the camera recording on my laptop. I told her that I wanted to sue for adultery and adhere to the scorched earth policy. She advised against it but followed my instructions. Brenda was served at work on Tuesday. She called my office after handing over the documents. "What the hell is going on, Blake?" "I told you what I was going to do," she snapped. "And I told you what I was going to do. If you quickly agree to a divorce, I will replace the reason with irreconcilable differences and will not pursue a scorched earth policy. Otherwise, you're going to have a very unpleasant few months, you stupid fool." With that, I hung up the phone. To complete the picture, I sued Stephanie Bromwell for fraud and a number of other offenses. Besides, I called Phil and told him that within the next year, either I or someone I hired would break both his legs. His feigned bravado indicated that he thought I was serious and that he was scared. Although I didn't really have the intention to beat the shit out of Phil, as he knew I was angry and capable of it, he would have been very uncomfortable for a long period of time. Brenda demonstrated how ignorant she was when she was surprised when I started pestering her, bringing her to tears during our 2 face-to-face meetings that were scheduled by the court. About 2 months after I applied, Brenda finally realized the hopelessness of the situation. For the first time in months, I was able to understand her. She signed the documents confirming the divorce, put our house up for sale, and divided all assets in a ratio of 60-40 in my favor. 2 days after Brenda signed the papers, Katie called me. "Hi, Blake. Since we're both single now, may I invite you to lunch?" I was surprised. It immediately strained my zipper. Of course, but let me buy you a drink." "No, I'm buying. Could you meet me tomorrow at the main restaurant of the Four Seasons Hotel at noon? It's only 3 blocks from your office," she intoned. Of course," I replied. "Great, see you then," she chirped before hanging up. Another woman I didn't understand. I never thought that Katie liked me and that she tolerated me just because I was her best friend's husband. The sixth fateful event, lunch with Katie, didn't last long. Well, that's not exactly true. The dining part did not last long. Animal love in room 551 of the Vermena Goda Hotel continued until the next morning. 3 months after our night in room 551, it turned out that Katie, who is not prone to commitment, wants a serious relationship, and this made me realize again how little I understand women. I wasn't sure I wanted a serious relationship with Katie. I've always had problems with her personality. However, after we made love like animals for 4 months, after a night in room 551, and my mind was constantly full of endorphins, so I was always calm and even became more productive at work. I thought that despite my misunderstanding, it seemed like it was hard for me to finish the thought. "What's wrong, Katie?" "Blake, please love me. I do not know what I will do if you refuse. I can't imagine life without you. Please, please love me." The most self-confident, commitment-free woman I've ever met in my life, and the most beautiful of them, couldn't stand it and begged me to love her. Wow, I really didn't understand women. However, although I admit my naivety, I'm not really stupid. I kissed Katie gently, turned slowly, and stroked her gently. I constantly covered her face and neck with kisses while we were copulating. It was the first time I made love to Katie. It didn't bring as much physical satisfaction as our many monkey toys, especially riding backwards by a female rider the night before. However, this was more than offset by the most complete emotional satisfaction I have ever experienced, even when Brenda and I were in love with each other. Getting out of the car, I kissed Katie again and said with a smile, "I really love you, Katie. Marry me." When, a day later, we finally got out of bed, not only to take a shower or have a snack, we went to the store to buy a ring. I still don't understand women, but hopefully this time I won't be as naive as last time. There are no more bets. End.